So before A Quiet Place came out, there was a lot of speculation that it was going to be a secret Cloverfield movie. At the last minute, they were going to announce that it's part of the Cloverfield franchise and part of the extended Cloververse. Now, while it didn't pan out that they used the Cloverfield branding for the movie, I do think if you want to explain the origin of these monsters and where they came from, how they got to Earth, the best way to do that is to actually connect it to the Cloververse. So I'm going to give a detailed explanation for why I think that's the case. Now, there's four possible explanations for where these demons came from. They could be supernatural, so ghosts or demons. They could have evolved from something else here on Earth. They could have been a science experiment gone wrong, or they could be extraterrestrial, aliens. Now, we get hints in the movie that they are aliens. We see newspaper clippings, certain ways that they're described that makes us think they're aliens. But I think if you think about it logically, we can logically rule out every explanation other than aliens. So the first possibility that it's supernatural. These are spirits, ghosts, demons, angels sent from God to punish us for being such a loud and noisy species. The fact that we see these intricate ears and we're able, as humans, we're able to use sound and amplified sound to potentially defeat these creatures, none of that would indicate that these are supernatural. It seems they're very much flesh and blood creatures. So the second option, that they evolved from something else here on Earth, we know this isn't true because we know we're in present time. So we actually see the date that we're in from their child that dies. We see when he was born. It was 2016 to 2020, I think. So we know we're in current times. Nothing could evolve that quickly. Evolution takes a really long time to work. So the idea that these creatures could naturally evolve in modern times, we know that's not true. Now, last explanation that's not true, a science experiment. Now, first scientists to create just one of these creatures, maybe you could say scientists through genetically fiddling around with things, they could create maybe one of these monsters. But to create, and we know there's at least three in the area, for these monsters to have pacified the whole US military, at least hundreds, maybe thousands, we're talking about these creatures spreading throughout the globe. So for scientists to create an entire species that's so different than anything that's existed on Earth before, I think that just strains the limits of what, again, remember, we're in present times, that strains the limits of what science could achieve. Again, for science to create a new species, even very similar to one that already exists, that would be very difficult for them to create. But for them to create a whole new species, either to create hundreds of these things from scratch or to create a few of these things, and then also the ability for these things to breed and become a species and to give them these traits that we've never seen in anything else on Earth. Nothing on Earth has the ability to move at the speed that these do. So I think we can rule out that it's a science experiment, and in that case we're left with only one possibility, that they're aliens, they come from another planet. But if they're aliens, that begs the question, how did they get to Earth? So if you observe these creatures, they don't seem to have either the intelligence or even the ambition to ever build ships that could travel at least from one solar system to the other. They seem to operate purely on just blind instinct. So the only explanation you could really come up with is that another alien species that had the higher intelligence to build ships, they transported these creatures and then dropped them off on our planet to terraform it. By terraforming, I mean getting rid of us by using this as a kind of weapon. But it just seems like a species that with that much ability to use another killing machine species like this to try to wipe us out, they could wipe us out with a far more effective strategy. As you can see, this strategy, not only is it taking quite a bit of time, but also ultimately it may prove ineffective because you can deduce these creatures' weaknesses by looking, and you can see their very intricate ears. You can then probably, it doesn't take too much to figure out, well, maybe we could use sound as a weapon. And at the end of the movie, it's left ambiguous whether we're able to use this knowledge to actually defeat them. So if it was a very, very clever alien species using this species to wipe us out, seems like a poor strategy. Now, the only way it could get to Earth without a ship is if either it could travel through space on its own without any kind of ship. Now, it's debatable whether any kind of non-supernatural being could really travel across from one solar system to another by itself without any kind of spacecraft. Certainly don't think that the creatures we see here, which don't seem that different at a fundamental level from creatures that exist on Earth, it's certainly inconceivable that they could. And if they could, then why would they choose Earth? Why would they not travel to the moon, for instance? Because the explanation we get for why they're killing humans, it's not because they hate humans, it's not because they feed on humans, it's just annoyance. The sounds we make are very irritating to them, so they kill us just to stop us from making the noise. So if that was what they wanted, if that was their goal, why would they not just go to the moon or go to any of the other planets in our solar system where it's going to be much, much, much quieter than on Earth? It's a very noisy planet, relatively speaking. And then the idea that they came here on a meteor, a lot of the same reasons why they can't travel through space by themselves, they also can't travel through space on a meteor, not least of which, how are they going to cling to it and not fall off? How did they originally get to the meteor, I guess, mid-flight, as the meteor is already in flight? So that doesn't make sense when people talk about a meteor bringing aliens to Earth. Usually they're talking about the origin of life, and they're talking about molecules, chemicals, DNA. They talk about, those very small things coming to Earth, and then the origin of life coming from that. They're not talking about fully formed aliens using meteors as a kind of space travel. So counterintuitively, one of the most reasonable explanations for how these creatures got to Earth is, I made a whole video about this, I'll link it in the description. There's a bunch of alternate realities. In one of these alternate realities, there's a planet that exists in the same place in the universe where in our reality Earth exists. So in this alternate reality, in the same place where Earth exists in our reality, there's a different planet. Now the atmosphere on this planet is different. Therefore, creatures on this planet, they would develop ears that are very different than the ears that we develop, because sound has a lot to do with the atmosphere of the planet that you're on. So these creatures develop on this planet, in this alternate reality, very different than creatures develop here on Earth. Now, as we see in Cloverfield Paradox, all these tears open up holes where things can fall from one reality to another reality. And as we can see, this planet with its different atmosphere and different creatures is in the exact same spot as the Earth is on our reality. So when this tear is created, a few of these creatures, and it only takes a few, fall through this hole, and suddenly they fall to Earth. And the hole might be created, and they might fall 100 meters up in the sky. So that's why some people might have seen these falling things, and that's why they're called angels. And because the planets in these alternate realities could be very different, they could have different orbit patterns, they could even be orbiting around a different sun. So they may be in slightly different locations, and that's why when the rift is created, these creatures could be falling from the sky. Now, a few of them fall from the sky, only takes a few, and we see how the invasion had started small. There were kids started to go missing. We saw those missing kids posters. People probably saw sightings, but no one else saw them, so no one believed them. And then slowly, these creatures, 2 of them could have fallen through, and they started to breed. We got more and more, and then slowly we see the full-scale invasion start to take place. And one of the reasons why I think this interpretation makes a lot of sense is when we see these creatures and how they behave, it doesn't seem like divine wrath and punishment from God. It doesn't seem like an intelligent plan to wipe us out. It doesn't seem sinister and nefarious. It seems like just a horrible freak accident. These creatures, they seem like they got dumped on the planet, don't know how to get off it, and really they're just instinctively reacting to this new environment they find themselves in. Now, this theory doesn't really explain that newspaper headline we get that says Mexico struck by a meteor. But I feel like that could be just a red herring. It could be unrelated to the origin of these creatures. It could be someone mistaking these creatures falling through the time rift. It could be someone mistaking it for a meteor, and it was just a misreported headline that was later cleared up. Anyways, any of these explanations, yeah, they seem kind of inadequate, but I think they're all better than the explanation that these creatures hitched a ride to this meteor, came out of the inside of the meteor, or any other, or developed from DNA that was found on the meteor. I don't think any of those explanations make any sense. I think that the explanation that it's a red herring or there's some other explanation to explain it makes a lot more sense. Now, do they look like the monsters in Cloverfield? Well, yes and no, but the beauty of this many worlds interpretation of the Cloverfield paradox is that they don't have to look exactly like the monsters. So if we see them, first of all, their heads look exactly like on the new season of Stranger Things, the demogorgons. We see their heads look so similar. But as far as similarities to the monsters we see in the first Cloverfield movie, they have the same long, kind of lanky limbs, kind of that praying mantis effect. So you could say, look, they're monsters from different realities, but realities that branched off from each other fairly recently. So they share a lot of traits and a lot of similarities. There's maybe some similar DNA, but they're not from exactly the same reality. They fell from different realities, so they're not exactly the same. So there's lots more I want to say, but I gotta stop because there's construction outside. It's driving me crazy. So all in all, I think we're going to debate about where these monsters come from, what their origin is, but I think one of the better explanations is that they did come across from a tear from another reality. And if we do go with that interpretation, you could connect this to the broader Cloverfield universe. Whether you'd want to, that's another debate, but I think you could.